The White House is reviewing 1 million documents approved with the Biden auto pen. This comes as a former aide to Jill Biden, Anthony Bernal. He's the latest to plead the fifth.
Did you ever advise President Joe Biden to pardon his son, Hunter Biden?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer the question pursuant to my Fifth Amendment rights under the Constitution.
Was President Joe Biden fit to exercise the duties of the president?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer the question pursuant to my Fifth Amendment rights.
Did any unelected official or family member of President Joe Biden execute the duties of the presidency?
Respectfully decline to answer the question.
Did President Joe Biden ever instruct you to lie regarding his health at any time?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer the question.
Okay, I think you get the point. There's a lot of that pleading the fifth. House Oversight Committee member Congressman Pat Fallon joins me now. Congressman, Biden says he made all the decisions with the auto pen. He made them himself. Are you okay with that explanation?
Stuart, absolutely not, because if he really did, all of his aides would be more than willing to just come forward and answer the questions and not invoke the fifth. I mean, how are you going to incriminate yourself when you're just asked a question about somebody else and in a matter that's really more political moving forward? That's why our office is going to file legislation to compel the use of the auto pen only when you're signing, a letter from 8-year-old Cade from Waco, Texas kind of thing. If it has force of law or an executive order and it's going to require action of the federal government, it should be signed by the hand of the President of the United States, period, end of story, full stop.
Well, I'm sure you know that Congressman, Democrat Jasmine Crockett, she spoke on the auto pen investigation. I think she thinks it's a waste of money, but listen to this.
Can you give us a reaction, your thoughts this morning?
Just another time in which we're wasting taxpayer money. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, that's the point, a waste of taxpayers' money. What do you think, Congressman? Is it a waste of taxpayer money to find out who was in charge?
No, I think that's a very important thing for the American people and for our Constitution. When we elect someone, we don't elect a family member of the president. We don't elect bureaucrats. We elect one person to be the president of the United States, and that person should exercise those duties. I don't think there's anything more important, but I don't tend to comment on what Ms. Crockett says because it's always hard left drivel and cover for the Democrats. And then we just have to move forward and just consider the source.
I think that was a comment, Congressman. Hard left drivel. I think that was a comment, if I'm not mistaken.
Here with the latest, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Those are pretty simple questions to answer, but we all know that Joe was a cognitive mess, and correct me if I'm wrong, Congressman, but if the answer was, I never saw the decline, I would believe anybody that says that is lying. So probably it was good advice of counsel to say plead the fifth.
Of course, you plead the fifth to avoid self-incrimination. If he said under oath that Joe Biden was not in mental decline, then there's a very good likelihood that he's lying, and he knows he's lying, and that can be proven in a court of law that he's lying. That's why they're pleading the fifth. We asked the doctor simple questions. Were you ever told to lie about Joe Biden's health? And he pled the fifth. Look, this isn't getting any better for the Bidens. This isn't going to go away for the Bidens. What's at stake here, Sean, is all of these executive orders and all of these pardons that were signed using an auto pen. There's no evidence that Joe Biden knew anything about these executive orders and pardons, and there's no evidence that he was even capable of understanding what the pardons and executive orders would have been if he had been involved in the decision-making process. So it's unfortunate that Jill Biden's chief of staff, and who she often referred to as her work husband, Anthony Bernal, had an opportunity today to go in and tell the truth and defend the Bidens and say, yeah, he's in great health. No one ever lied about his health. But instead of saying that, he pled the Fifth Amendment.
How damning was the information in the New York Times piece where they acknowledged that Joe Biden laid out standards and conditions and parameters for his staff to issue either a commutation or a pardon?
Very damaging. Look, he incriminated himself there. That's not the way the pardon process is supposed to work. The pardon process is the last tool in the toolbox, in the checks and balances of the justice system. You're supposed to have a pardon issued by the President of the United States that he's reviewed and that he signed with an ink pen. And Joe Biden admitted in the New York Times article he didn't know about a lot of those pardons. He just delegated it to staff. No, that's not the way it works. And we think that's what was going on with the auto pen on a majority of the pardons and many of the executive orders. And if that's the case, then those executive orders and those pardons, in my opinion, can be ruled void in a court of law.
All right. Let me ask you, from a legal standpoint, you know, would this render any pardon or commutation if Joe Biden only laid out parameters or circumstances under which his staff could use the auto pen to issue a commutation or a pardon? Would that render them invalid in your view legally? Greg Jarrett.
Oh, absolutely. If unelected people commandeered Biden's presidency, usurped his authority, it's not just wrongful and scandalous conduct, Sean, but it crosses the line into criminality if they fraudulently executed documents in his name without his knowledge or consent by essentially hijacking the auto pen. Biden recently admitted unwittingly that he did not approve each individual pardon. His chief of staff signed off on them and actually sent final approval in writing. Well, under law, a president cannot delegate that decision of when to use the auto pen. And yet we heard from White House aide Neera Tanden reportedly testifying she had no idea who in Biden's inner circle gave her permission to use the auto pen. It wasn't Joe Biden. She rarely saw him. So any document that he did not directly approve for signature is null and void. It's invalid. And not only that, it's potential fraud and forgery. And if there is this underlying plot to hide Biden's mental condition so that others could arrogate his power in that way, that's a conspiracy crime. So it's no wonder two people have already taken the fifth. They know they're facing some legal jeopardy here.
Right. Last question, Congressman Comer. Do you plan on calling Jill and Joe Biden in as witnesses?
Well, I think the odds of calling in Jill Biden increased significantly today. We had her chief of staff and her self-proclaimed work husband there for what we planned to be an 8-hour deposition, and he kept invoking the Fifth Amendment, and his lawyer finally said, you can ask all the questions you want. We're going to invoke the Fifth Amendment on every question. So we need to know, was Jill Biden the one calling the shots? While Joe Biden was incapacitated, Anthony Bernal had an opportunity to answer those questions today. He chose to invoke the Fifth Amendment, so I would say her odds significantly increased, Sean.
All right, Congressman Comer, thank you, and Greg Jarrett.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't inflation gotten worse under your policy? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the deadline was next week. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're just covering for them. Pursuant to. The company acted pursuant to the new federal regulations. Incriminate, he refused to answer the question in case he incriminated himself. Compel, the court can compel a witness to testify. Commutation, the governor granted him a commutation of his sentence.
Render, his actions rendered the contract invalid. Pardon, the president issued a full pardon for the convicted man. Jeopardy, he was in legal jeopardy after violating the agreement. Unwittingly, she unwittingly revealed confidential information. Plead the fifth. The defendant chose to plead the fifth during the trial. Invoke the fifth. The witness invoked the fifth to avoid self-incrimination.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.